Before prolific shooter in YBC, Curry was caught for the murder of Sidney Sessoms inside his own home, he actually committed another savage double murder that would take the life of 2 teenagers with loose affiliations to YBC's rivals. The shocking triple shooting would take place in West Philly on Wednesday, July 21st, 2021. Around noon, a 16-year-old student athlete, Kalen Johnson, known by friends as KJ or K3, with his football jersey also repping the number 3. He had just finished the summer school at Boys Latin Charter School and was headed to play basketball with his friends. KJ had also just got his driver's license a few weeks earlier, and he would take a few of his friends with him in his car, including his childhood friend and another gifted basketball player, Tommy Frazier, also known as Lil Snipe, as well as 2 other youths. Unfortunately, what they didn't know was that they were being trailed by 2 people associated with YBC, who were on a hunt for one of the 2 boys in the car who was allegedly affiliated with a rival gang. KJ would drive about 1 mile before stopping at the intersection of 56th and Vine to drop off one of the friends. But there, one of the 2 people trailing the group from YBC would open fire on the car, hitting KJ and Tommy multiple times, including KJ in the head and Tommy in the chest, killing both of them, while one of the other youths would get hit in the shoulder but fortunately survived. And in true YBC fashion, the 4th youth that was the actual intended target of the shooters would escape the scene without getting hit, and calling KJ's mother soon after to tell her what had happened. Only 8 minutes before the shooting, KJ himself had called his mum to let her know about his plans, his last words to her being, "Love you, bye mum." KJ's mum would then rush to the scene, but her son had already been taken to the Presbyterian hospital, where KJ would unfortunately be pronounced dead. Not long after the shooting, local television news would be at the scene, capturing the police investigating KJ's blue Hyundai that was now riddled with bullets.
Developing right now, 2 teens were killed and a 3rd was hurt in a triple shooting this afternoon on the 200 block of North 56th Street in West Philadelphia. Police say the teens who were killed were both 15. Both males were shot multiple times in the torso, and a 16-year-old was shot once in the shoulder. He is in stable condition. No arrests have been made.
The gun violence crisis now led to more tragedy this afternoon in West Philadelphia. 2 teens are dead after they were shot on North 56th Street near the scene of another shooting that happened just last night. A 3rd teen was seriously hurt.
It's babies! It's babies! These are babies!
That West Philadelphia woman voicing what many feel after 2 young lives were taken as a result of gun violence this afternoon. While police investigate what happened on North 56th and Vine, the community can't help but feel despair.
I mean, it's all over. It was just a shooting last night.
That same evening and the next day, many local news would report on this recent tragedy in the streets of Philly, highlighting both the deadly toll of 2021 so far and the month of July specifically, during which over 200 people had been killed or wounded in shootings in just 20 days. The violence had gotten so bad in Philly at this point that the mayor had to come out and explain to people why he was refusing to declare a state of emergency.
2 teenagers are dead, another is injured after gunfire erupted in West Philadelphia. This comes as Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney defends his decision to not declare a state of emergency as gun violence continues to surge to record levels in the city. Action News reporter Dan Cuellar is live at police headquarters tonight with more. Dan.
Rick, it is clear that the lines have been drawn on whether a state of emergency should be declared to stem the tide of rising record gun violence. A growing number of community activists saying one should be declared immediately. The mayor today doubling down, saying he will not do so.
If this isn't a public crisis, then what is? If this isn't a public health issue that needs to be done in an emergency, what needs to be done?
Community activist Tariq Glasgow is just one of a number of voices across the city that have been calling on Mayor Jim Kenney to declare a state of emergency in the wake of gun violence that's gone unabated by anything the city has done so far.
It's hitting home, so it's real to us. Every day it's affected all of our households. And to say that it's not in a state of emergency, it is an emergency.
Today at noon, an hour before the mayor was to address gun violence, 3 teenage males were shot in the 200 block of North 56 that were sitting in a blue Hyundai. A 16 and 18-year-old were shot and killed. A 3rd victim, a 16-year-old, was wounded after being shot in the shoulder. But the mayor doesn't believe a state of emergency declaration is needed.
What I think it could do is have an unintended consequence and cause more fear in our communities, especially communities of color, already dealing with decades of systemic racism and poverty, which we are committed to getting rid of.
The Action News data team reports that 1,289 people have been shot so far this year in Philadelphia, that the city has a higher homicide rate than both Chicago and New York City.
We have to start taking accountability. The politicians can only do so much. The community activists can only do so much. We, as adults, as parents, as guardians, have to start housing or houses.
Others agree with that assessment, but say a state of emergency declaration is still needed.
The emergency would bring resources and activities to the community to address the things that are happening.
It's enough of the BS. Those people that are in high position, they need to exercise their power to do what we need to do to get the people in here to help these communities.
The mayor says he is planning to meet with Governor Tom Wolf to discuss other plans of action to deal with the unrelenting surge in gun violence across the city.
6 ABC would also run longer coverage about the double murder on their TV news, mentioning how there had been several students from the Boys Latin Charter School who had also been killed since 2016, as well as interviewing KJ's aunt and mentioning that the family knew that he wasn't the intended target, meaning that the police also likely knew what the shooting was really about from early on.
In other news tonight, teenagers with bright futures shot in broad daylight in West Philadelphia. Today, we're learning more about the 2 students who were killed while they were on their way to play basketball.
There were 4 young men that were in a vehicle that was shot at 56th and Vine yesterday. 3 of them attended Boys Latin, and 1 of them was killed. His name was KJ Johnson. We spoke to his family a short time ago. They say he was excellent at school, excellent at sports, and was loved by so many.
KJ wasn't murdered because he threatened somebody. He wasn't murdered because he was in a fight or he had some sort of beef. He was murdered because someone was just reckless and thoughtless. And they just don't understand what they took away from us.
KJ was killed around noon yesterday at 56th and Vine. Shots were fired into his brand new car.
KJ just got his driver's license. And his mom rewarded him for being a good kid and being respectful. And she got him a car. He used his car to go to basketball practice.
2 additional Boys Latin students were in the car. One of them, a 16-year-old, was injured by gunfire. 18-year-old Tommy Frazier was also in the vehicle and was killed by gunfire. Frazier was part of the Mastery, Harrity, Hardy High, and Gratz High School communities, according to an email that was sent to faculty today. KJ excelled at all sports, his family says, and just played in a basketball tournament Sunday. He was leaving Boys Latin and picked up Tommy Frazier to head to play basketball, plus the 2 additional boys. KJ's family says they know he was not the intended target. He is the 6th Boys Latin student killed from gun violence since 2016. The school lost Jashawn Patton, William Bethel, Saeed Woodson, Kyrie Simmons, and Tyre Barnes. KJ's family today is reeling.
He was just being a kid, doing what he's supposed to do, doing what kids do. So, I mean, this is horrible. This is horrible for all of us. This is horrible for the family. This is horrible for his mother. She lost her only child, her son, her best friend.
A few days later, the Philadelphia Inquirer would write a long story about KJ and Tommy, as well as pointing out how many of the victims of the gun violence epidemic in Philly were still only teenagers, while the CBS Philadelphia and Fox 29 TV News would cover the vigils held for both victims.
Emotional night as a community remembers a teenager whose life was taken entirely too early. Tonight, friends and family honored the life of the boy they knew as KJ. Here's Shawnette Wilson.
Balloons released in memory and honor of 16-year-old Kaylin Johnson. Outside KJ's school, Boys Latin Charter. KJ played basketball and football for the school.
On the days that he would come to practice, it was funny because I always laugh with him, like there's always a bright color on, either a bright yellow or a bright orange. Everybody can see KJ from a mile away.
Santina Norman says she's known KJ since he was in 2nd grade, once her neighbor and her son's first childhood friend.
The violence that's happening, like my boys, they've lost 3 close friends in a matter of less than 30 days.
Tanisha Pratt lost her son Tahir, a student here too, in 2016. He and KJ were friends.
I feel like this happened to me all over again. It just brings back memories.
Tahir was a good guy. KJ was a good guy. And they got killed for what? Because somebody had a gun and they thought they were big.
At the same time of the balloon release, a community meeting on gun violence was happening at Tabernacle Lutheran Church in West Philly.
And this gives
us an opportunity to own our own neighborhoods and say, this is how we feel these issues need to be addressed.
KJ's mother would also give an interview to Fox 29, telling how she didn't want KJ to be just another number in the statistics.
Two families mourning the loss of their sons in two separate shootings in Philadelphia. The city now well over 300 murders due to the out-of-control violence. I'm Dawn Timoney. One of the victims was a student at Boys Latin Charter School. In fact, he's the sixth student at that school to be killed in just 5 years. And tonight, Kelly, you spoke with his heartbroken mother.
Dawn, I did. The family of 16-year-old Kaylin Johnson, best known as KJ, do not want him to be just another statistic. They tell me he was loved, he had so much going for him, and he was innocent in this. He was not the intended target, and yet he was struck by another senseless bullet.
The person that saved my life, that kept me off the streets, I wasn't there to save his.
The mom of 16-year-old Kaylin Johnson, known as KJ, says her last conversation with her son, he asked for permission, like he always did before going somewhere, to go to the YMCA before work Wednesday. But he never made it there.
At 12:05, my son wasn't here no more. My whole life was for him.
He was a kid that did not deserve what happened to him. Point blank, period.
Later on, KJ's high school football team would announce that they are retiring the number of his jersey, the number 3, during an emotional event where his family was present to receive the framed jersey.
Thank you. From this point on, no one will ever wear the number 3 in Boys Latin again. This is KJ's number. It's his number. No one in Boys Latin will wear that number again. We're going to present you with this jersey.
We got you tonight. You will.
It seems that this truly senseless slaying of two talented teens who had just so happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time will become a symbol of the gun violence epidemic going on in the city, and the local newspapers like the Philadelphia Inquirer would later publish very long stories about the two victims, where particularly KJ's mother would open up about her struggles after losing her only son, but also about hope as she would later give birth to a new child whom she would name Ryder after KJ's favorite pastime hobby of riding dirt bikes, and how the community had come together to pay tribute to the two, showing images from the memorial service for Tommy held on July the 29th, 2021, and a moving photo depicting KJ's mother, Emily Johnson, placing roses on her son's casket. The friends of KJ and Tommy would post their own tributes on social media, with one friend of KJ, named Keon Wright, a current defensive line of Delaware Fighting Blue Hens college football team, posting a photo of himself playing with a custom shirt that says Forever KJ at the back. At this point, YBC had caused untold grief and suffering in their West Philly community, but it was all about to come crashing down, as the Philadelphia Inquirer would later detail in their June the 9th, 2024 cover story. A big piece of the puzzle would be an informant close with some of the YBC members, whom the police would first catch in September 2021 when he was moving with a stolen vehicle. This being the same month when Curry would be caught for the murder of Sid. As the police were about to finish processing him for the crime of being in possession of a stolen vehicle, the young man would suddenly tell that he had information on not one, but 4 murders, including the dates and approximate locations and the street names of the assailants, these being none other than Yah, aka Baby Wick, Reek 1200, Murder K, aka Baby 1K, Curry, and F5. It would turn out that the killers of KJ and Tommy were the latter two, Curry and F5, who would in fact drive after the murders to a friend's house in North Philly, where they would proudly tell about their latest escapade to their friends, one of these people eventually turning informant. With regards to Baby 1K, aka Zaire Crawford, as well as Reek 1200, aka Samaj Nolan, and Yassine Miles, aka Baby Wick, who would both have warrants out for their arrests in the relation to the murders of Nas and Kanye, law enforcement would have some solid evidence tying them to the murders, including text messages, cell phone data, and video of the getaway car. But they were still missing an actual witness who could identify the shooters and provide a motive. Luckily, Baby 1K, aka Crawford, would allegedly tell all about these murders to the informant, telling him how they had simply seen that somebody was walking and begun shooting, killing Nas, who was reportedly not involved in the gang life at all, and then revealing that he had counted his bullets after killing Nas and knew that he only had 3 left for Kanye, so that when they saw him, he knew he had to make those bullets count. The informant's testimony would reportedly be crucial during the trial, where Nolan, aka Reek, and Crawford, aka Baby 1K, would both receive 35 years to life, while Miles, aka Baby Wick, would receive 20 to 40 years for a conspiracy to commit murder, and then in the case of Curry, who had already been caught red-handed for the murder of Sid in September 2021, as well as Sherman, aka aka F5, we would see that informant testifying in front of a grand jury in relation to their cases. Particularly, Crawford, aka Baby 1K, would then do possibly the smartest thing in his life and plead guilty, eventually receiving a sentence of only 12.5 to 25 years for being the getaway driver during the murders of KJ and Tommy. Curry, on the other hand, as we already discussed previously, would get hit with a very long sentence, despite pleading guilty to everything because of the severity of these charges. This included the murders of KJ and Tommy and Sid, and the attempted murders of the friend of KJ who got shot in the car, as well as Sid's father who got shot when he shot up Sid's house. Add to that 2 counts of assault on a law enforcement officer when Curry opened fire towards 2 cops in the aftermath of the Sid murder. Even though he pled guilty, Curry would eventually get sentenced to 42.5 to 85 years, with an NBC 10 Philadelphia News report covering his conviction.
Convicted of killing 3 teens learns his fate. Earlier this month, the judge sentenced 22-year-old Arshad Curry for the murders of 3 Philadelphia teenagers. One of them was 16-year-old Kaylin Johnson, who was killed in July of 2021. Police say he was an innocent bystander. Curry pleaded guilty to a number of charges, including the murders. He was sentenced to more than 40 years in prison.
District Attorney Larry Krasner would troll the YBC gang after Curry became the 5th of 5 YBC members to get sentenced, in addition to Baby Wick, Reek 1200, Baby 1K, and F5, with Krasner saying how YBC now stands for You've Been Convicted, and that the young bag chasers wouldn't be chasing anything from inside their prison cells.
This is the DAO regular Monday, usually, press conference. As always, we have a couple of topics, the first being data and other information around gun violence, which I will go through. And the second, today, has to do with the conviction and sentencing of defendant Arshad Curry. That's A-R-S-H-A-D, last name Curry, C-U-R-R-Y, for his role in multiple shootings and homicides in Philadelphia. Ultimately, this case is about YBC. And YBC, sometimes known as the Young Bag Chasers, has a new name. I didn't invent it. Somebody else did. The new name is You've Been Charged. And the newer name is You've Been Convicted. Because at this point, we are looking at multiple murders, multiple shootings, multiple convictions for horrific killings, very often of people they did not target, that occurred over a period of time. This is the 5th of 5 YBC defendants, or as we call them, You've Been Convicted. They used to call themselves Young Bag Chasers. They're not chasing much inside those cells anymore, but this is the 5th of 5 YBC defendants convicted.
The assistant DA, Sidney Pope, would also chime in, pointing out what Curry had posted on his social media after pleading guilty, which showed that he seemingly had no remorse whatsoever about what he had done.
And what Arshad Curry said after he pled guilty is all that you need to know. When it's all said and done, I remain a soldier. I stand on business. They can take my freedom, can't take my morals or respect, though. And nobody ever played with me or mine without retaliation. My name golden in this. You can't say Curry without turning heads. That's on an Instagram account. These are photographs of Arshad Curry taken in jail on State Road, in possession of a shiv in the next photo, and he holds it in his hand. Make no mistake about it, Arshad Curry has continued to commit crimes while in custody.
Fox 29 Philadelphia would then report on the sentencing of Curry and the DA's press briefing, showing particularly a speech given by KJ's mother, who would also react to the news whilst also sharing her own experience of getting trolled by YBC members after her son's death, before noting that this senseless violence had ruined the lives of 9 young men, including both the 4 victims and the 5 YBC members who would now be sentenced to long prison terms.
Just imagine sending your son to school and they don't come home from school.
Emily Johnson is numb still over the murder of her son, 16-year-old Kaylin Johnson, after which she says his killers taunted her and bragged about it in music they made.
Not only does your only child not return home from school, you're getting trolled by, you're getting harassed by a bunch of, untalented rappers dissing you about your son that was, an accident.
Johnson spoke tearfully today during the district attorney's weekly news conference. Larry Krasner announced the conviction of Kaylin's killer, 22-year-old Arshad Curry, seen here in pictures the DA displayed during the news conference. Curry is the 5th of 5 YBC members, which stands for Young Bag Chasers.
The new name is you've been charged, and the newer name is you've been convicted.
Krasner says Kaylin isn't the only victim.
We are looking at multiple murders, multiple shootings.
This one crime took 9 people off the street. My son who's no longer here, the remainder that are in jail that are never coming home. Who's winning?
Indeed, after the murders of KJ and Tommy, the YBC rappers headed by Dull would diss these allegedly unintended targets of the shootings, as well as the mother of KJ numerous times. Only 6 days after the double murder, F5 released the song Serena with a music video where he raps numerous bars about YBC killing their ops, before rapping how he's riding around with his shooter on the shotgun seat, whilst referencing Megan Thee Stallion's famous lyrics from her song Body, saying how they got a lot of bodies. These lyrics seemingly describing exactly what happened during the murders of KJ and Tommy, where F5 was allegedly the driver and Curry was the shooter. Dull, on the other hand, in the song Criminal, asks why KJ's car stopped at the red lights, claiming they knew they were followed, before saying that they scored on him and making a basketball reference to a shot clock, which is used in the sport to indicate how much time a team has to possess the ball before scoring. In the song Letter to Larry, Dull raps how KJ, aka K3's mother, was bitching at him when she got the news about her son's murder, and that he's not capping in his raps when he says that the ops are dying, including K3 and Tommy, aka Snipe, as some of his examples. The disses towards KJ's mother would continue in the song Killers Love Me, where Dull raps the infamous bar that he might slap KJ's mother, as well as making a now ironic remark about saying whatever he wants because nobody would dare to touch him. Even in the song with the YouTuber Brandon Buckingham, titled McBuckingham, released only a week before Dull's death, he would take shots at the 2 murdered teens, saying how they got killed while asking how someone named Osama made it out the car, Osama then perhaps being the intended target of that shooting. Also, in the intros to several songs, Dull can be heard opening the songs by listing some of the people allegedly killed by YBC, including Buddy, aka Bud, Fro, aka Sid, Rizzy or Q Raw, and Tommy, aka Snipe. Likely due to the trolling that the mother would have to endure in the aftermath of losing her son, she too had taken to social media several times to troll back at some of the YBC members, including Reek 1200 when he would get arrested in 2022 after being on the run and later being sent to state prison, and F5 when he would get sent to state prison, and of course Curry, whom she would diss with a cryptic message saying how Curry had been a crash dummy for someone who had sent him to shoot Buddy, and that Curry had now ended up right where the last person who had tried to kill Buddy had also ended up, before also saying that some of the youngsters who knew KJ were now being cool with YBC out of fear. Some Redditors would criticize her for not behaving more maturely, while also claiming that KJ never had a chance with a mother like that, while many others would be more understanding, pointing out the absolute hell that she must have gone through after losing not only her son, but then having his killers troll and harass her constantly in songs and on social media, and that in reality there was no telling what somebody would have done in her shoes. Others would seemingly insinuate that KJ wasn't just an innocent athlete posting a picture of him smoking a blunt and pointing a gun with a laser beam on it, but the camera. But of course KJ wasn't just an athlete, but also a teenager who had grown up in an area that had turned into an increasingly dangerous war zone during his adolescence, where many kids, including likely many of his friends, had become increasingly active participants in that war. And while the murder rate in Philly would begin to decrease after the record-breaking year of 2021, there was unfortunately no stopping the carnage that YBC was involved in, and what ultimately wound up happening next was that with so many of their dangerous shooters locked up, in 2022, the YBC crew would be left with a weakened defense, and after years of terrorizing their ops and mocking them for losing so many friends, YBC would become the ones suffering back-to-back losses and getting trolled relentlessly.